The hidden psychology of being ignored in a group. You're sitting with people you know. The conversation is moving. Someone speaks and the group responds. Someone else speaks and the group leans in. Then you say something, not random, not stupid, and the conversation continues as if you hadn't spoken at all. No one acknowledges it. No one argues with it. They just keep talking. You feel it immediately. Not anger, not confusion, something quieter, a kind of erasure. Most people think being ignored is about what you said. They replay the moment, wondering if they were too quiet, too boring, too awkward. But that's not what's happening. What's happening is older, more automatic, and far more deliberate than it seems. Being ignored in a group is not an accident. It's a form of social enforcement. Groups don't function on fairness. They function on hierarchy. And hierarchy is maintained through attention. Attention is the currency of social power. When someone speaks and the group responds, they are being granted status. When someone speaks and the group continues without pause, they are being denied it. This denial is not passive, it's active. It's a boundary being drawn in real time. The person being ignored feels it as rejection, but the group doesn't experience it that way. To them, it feels natural. It feels like the conversation is simply flowing where it should. And that's the mechanism. Ignoring someone doesn't require cruelty. It only requires the group to protect its existing structure. People don't ignore you because they hate you. They ignore you because responding to you would shift the balance. And groups resist shifts instinctively. Think about a meeting at work. Someone mid-level suggests an idea. The room is silent. 2 minutes later, someone senior says something similar, and everyone nods. The mid-level person notices, but they don't say anything, because pointing it out would make them look desperate, so they stay quiet, and the pattern continues. Or think about a dinner table, a friend group. One person has been traveling, another just got promoted, another is dating someone new. These people hold the room. When they speak, others ask follow-up questions. When someone without recent status speaks, someone whose life is stable, uneventful, the response is polite but shallow. The conversation moves on quickly. It's not that their words are less interesting. It's that the group has already decided who gets amplified. And once that decision is made, even unconsciously, it's hard to reverse. On the surface, being ignored looks like bad luck. You spoke at the wrong time. You didn't project enough. You misread the room. And sometimes that's true. But more often, it's not about the moment. It's about the position you occupy in the group's invisible map. Every group has this map. It's not written down. It's not discussed. But everyone knows it. Some people are central. Others are peripheral. And the peripheral ones are not ignored because they're unlikable. They're ignored because the group has already allocated its attention elsewhere. When you're peripheral, your words don't carry weight, not because they're wrong, but because the group doesn't expect them to matter. And when people don't expect something to matter, they don't process it. It passes through them like background noise. The person doing the ignoring is not thinking, I will ignore this person. They're thinking nothing at all. That's what makes it effective. Conscious exclusion can be confronted. Unconscious exclusion cannot. The group ignores you because acknowledging you would require effort. It would require them to adjust, to make space, to reconsider who gets to speak and who gets to be heard. And most people, in most situations, do not want to do that work, so they don't. They let your words fall into silence and they continue. And because no one else reacts, the silence becomes normal. One person's non-response becomes the group's non-response, and you are left with the feeling that you don't exist. But here's what most people miss. The person ignoring you is not powerful. They are compliant. They are following the group's unspoken rules. The person who holds power in that moment is not the one who speaks the loudest. It's the one the group has decided to protect. You see this in families. A sibling who was always the favorite continues to be the favorite even when their behavior is worse. When they speak, people listen. When you speak, people glance at their phones. It's not about intelligence. It's not about charm. It's about a dynamic that was set years ago and has calcified into reflex. You see this in friendships. One person becomes the leader of the group, not through dominance but through habit. They suggest where to go, what to do, how to interpret situations, and over time, everyone defers to them. When someone else tries to lead, the group resists, not loudly, just passively. They don't follow, and eventually the person stops trying. You see this in relationships. One partner's feelings are taken seriously, the others are dismissed as overreacting. It's not always intentional, it's just that one person's emotional reality has been validated so many times that it feels true, and the other's has been ignored so many times that it feels exaggerated. Over time, the ignored person starts to believe the group. They start to think maybe they are too much, maybe they do talk too much, maybe they should just be quiet. And that's when the psychology becomes dangerous. When you're ignored repeatedly, something shifts inside you. At first, you try harder, you speak louder, contribute more, look for openings. But the group doesn't reward effort, it rewards alignment. And if you're trying too hard, you're signaling that you're not aligned. You're signaling that you're outside. So eventually you stop trying, you become quieter, you observe instead of participate. And here's the trap. Once you go quiet, the group interprets your silence as proof that you were never that engaged to begin with. They don't notice that they pushed you out. They think you left on your own. And maybe you did, but not by choice, by exhaustion. The person who is ignored long enough starts to internalize the group's judgment. They begin to see themselves as less interesting, less relevant, less worth listening to. And this belief doesn't stay in the group. It spreads. It affects how they speak in other rooms, with other people. They hesitate more. They second-guess more. They assume, before they even open their mouth, that no one cares. This is not paranoia. This is pattern recognition, and the pattern is real. What makes this dynamic so effective is that it requires no confrontation. No one has to tell you that you don't matter. They just have to act like it. And because the exclusion is silent, you can't fight it. You can't argue against something that was never said. If you try to address it, if you say, "Why does no one respond when I speak?" you will be told you're being sensitive. You will be told you're imagining things. And maybe one or two people will make an effort to include you for a few minutes. But the structure won't change. Because the structure doesn't depend on cruelty. It depends on comfort. And changing it would make people uncomfortable. So they don't. The instinct, when you're being ignored, is to force yourself into the conversation, to prove you belong, to make them see you. But that almost never works, because the harder you try, the more you confirm that you're not central. Central people don't have to try. What works, if anything works, is detachment. Not withdrawal, detachment. You stay present, you observe, but you stop performing. You stop waiting for validation. You stop measuring your worth by whether the group reacts. This doesn't fix the group. The group will continue to ignore you, or it won't. But it fixes something else. It fixes the part of you that was starting to believe the group's silence meant something about your value. It doesn't. The group's attention is not a measure of truth. It's a measure of alignment. And alignment is not the same as worth. There are people who leave groups and realize months later that no one reached out. Not because the group disliked them, but because the group didn't notice they were gone. That's how peripheral they had become. There are people who stay in groups for years, hoping that one day they'll be seen, and they never are, because the group's map was drawn a long time ago, and they were never on it. And there are people who recognize the pattern early, who see that the group is not structured to include them, and instead of fighting it, they leave, quietly, without drama, and they find other rooms, other people, other structures, where they are not peripheral. This is not bitterness, this is clarity. Most people will experience this at some point. Not everyone will recognize it. Some will blame themselves, some will blame the group. But the ones who survive it intact are the ones who understand that being ignored is not a reflection of their substance. It's a reflection of the group's need for order. Groups do not exist to be fair. They exist to be stable. And stability requires some people to matter more than others. If you're the one who matters less, you have two choices. You can spend years trying to matter more, or you can stop waiting for the group to decide your value. The second option is harder because it requires you to trust your own perception over the group's silence. And most people are not trained to do that, but the ones who are, those are the ones who stop being ignored. Not because the group changes, but because they stop asking the group for permission to exist. Eventually you'll sit in another room with different people, and someone will ignore you again, or they won't. And you'll notice how you react, whether you shrink, whether you push, whether you wait, and that reaction will tell you everything.
Listen to me right now. The key to everything you want in life comes down to one thing: people. You hear me? We are social animals, just like wolves, just like chimpanzees, just like dogs. And how you interact with people will determine how far you go. I don't care how brilliant you are at coding, at hacking, at whatever technical skill you've mastered. If you're terrible with people, your life is going to be absolute hell. So what really motivated you to become so skilled at reading people? Here's the thing. I became obsessed with understanding people because I needed to please them. I'm being very honest with you here. I had this deep desire to impress everyone around me. It goes back to childhood, you know. I always wanted the straight A's, to be the best student in class, to excel at sports. Sounds great, right? But there's a weakness hiding in that drive. It was insecurity, self-doubt. I was compensating, trying to prove something. And here's what you need to understand. That insecurity could have destroyed me. It could have paralyzed me to the point where I never wrote a book, never tried anything significant. Because if you doubt yourself enough, it's easier to never try at all. You know what a lot of young people do? They adopt this slacker mentality. If I don't try too hard, I can't really fail. They tell themselves they're the best slacker there is, like that's something to be proud of. You avoid the pain of failure by never putting yourself out there. That's the negative side of insecurity. But, and this is critical, insecurity can also push you to work harder than anyone else, to doubt yourself constantly in a way that makes your work sharper, better, more refined. That's how I use it. I mean, I had a stroke a couple months ago, probably from pushing myself too hard on my latest book. Not necessarily a good thing, okay? But that constant effort to connect with people, to understand them deeply, it comes from insecurity, but I've turned it into something positive. Here's something that's going to sound strange. You actually learn more from the negative than the positive. I thought about this in the ambulance after my stroke. I started thinking about all the people I knew who handled adversity terribly, who fell apart when things got hard. And I thought, I don't want to be them. And as I sat with that thought, I realized there's something powerful in identifying who you don't want to be. We never think like that, do we? That's such an interesting perspective, right? And it connects to something deeper. We're so attached to what we see on the surface, the appearances people project, the masks they wear. But I want you to start thinking about what isn't there, what you're not seeing, what's invisible beneath the surface. In everything I write, I'm trying to tell you, don't accept what you see with your eyes. Look for something deeper. What's the meaning behind this? If you're planning a strategy or making a big decision in your life, what are you not considering? What are you missing? The most important thing you have to do is learn to judge people's character. This is critical. Normally we think if someone's very charming, that's great, or if they're really good looking, or if they're wildly successful. So when you're looking for a business partner, a romantic partner, a colleague to work with, you're going to base your decision on those appearances. People can deceive you with charm and flattery. They can seduce you with a brilliant resume. Right? We fall for the surface level stuff. Exactly. What you want to do is say, no, that's not how I'm going to judge people. My main value is their character and the strength of their character. And character is something from deep deep, deep within. The word character comes from the Greek word meaning to carve. Character is something carved inside a person. It's who they are at their core. It creates patterns of behavior they can't even really control. It's who they are genetically. It's who they are from the early values their parents instilled in them. You want to connect to that. You want to see that. It's not immediately visible because people will disguise their character, but you need to see it and value it more than anything else. And what you want are people with strong character. Think about metal. There's this term called tensile strength. A metal is stronger if it can give a little bit, because if something is too rigid, it breaks. You want people who are adaptable, who can be fluid, who aren't weak, but who have inner strength and a core to them. They can bend, they can learn, they can adapt, they can change. You want people who are empathetic, who know how to get along with others. So if you have two people to choose from, and one has a glittering resume, but the other person understands human nature, is superior in a social sense, and has a strong work ethic, you choose that other person. You don't choose the glittering resume. One of the things you look for are patterns in people, because people reveal themselves through their past. They reveal who they are through their actions. They try to disguise it, but they reveal it. I say this in my work. Nobody ever does anything once. Let's say you have a friend who does something nasty to you. They talk behind your back. Then they'll say, "Oh, that was just something that came over me. That isn't me. I'm sorry about that. Circumstances made me do that." And you'll be likely to believe them. But here's the fact. If they've done that once, they've probably done it many times. So patterns always repeat. Always. If people gossip and you hear them gossiping about other people, they'll probably eventually gossip about you. You want to be able to look at people's patterns, look at their past, and understand that if they've done certain things before, they will continue to do them. Because we humans have compulsive behavior. We are compelled to repeat the same mistakes over and over and over again. When it comes to you and your own patterns, you have to first realize that you have these patterns before you can even begin to break them. This is about awareness and being honest with yourself. If you don't admit that you have these patterns, then you can't possibly break them. I know in writing books, I have terrible patterns. I take note cards for everything I read, all my research, and I take way too much information. I have thousands of them, and I have to stop and say, "Stop being such a perfectionist. You're wasting your time." It's been book after book after book. I'm very aware of it. But you have to see it and be honest with yourself in order to break it. So that's the first step, seeing the pattern and then not struggling against it. Not trying to be somebody you're not, but finding a way to use that pattern to your advantage. Think about someone like Joan Crawford from Hollywood's classical period. She had a very troubled childhood, didn't know her father, her mother beat her, men abused her, and it was creating terrible patterns in her life. But she found a way to turn that around, to use all of those disadvantages and make herself much stronger. A very powerful performer. She brought all the pain from her childhood into her acting. Because she had been abused, she was very sensitive to other people. She used that sensitivity to focus on directors and other actors, to be in tune with them. She was very aware of her own weaknesses and her own fragility, and she was able to use that as a strength. Now, with other people, it's never completely hopeless. I mean, some people are toxic. We've all met them. The deeply self-absorbed narcissist. There's nothing that's ever going to save them. Their patterns are too ingrained. People have to be able to change themselves. They have to be motivated. You can help illuminate some of their patterns and problems, but it has to come from within. Here's the point. None of us see the world in the same way. You and I could go watch a movie. It's the same movie we're watching. I love it. I see something. You hate it. You see something else. we don't experience it the same way. We're watching the same reality, but we experience it differently. Everybody you meet is experiencing their world differently than you are. You have an attitude that colors what you see. Some people have an attitude that tends toward the negative. And I describe a negative attitude as something that's closed. You're not open to new experiences. You're trying to close that lens. You have certain beliefs, certain ideas about life, and you're not willing to change them because that gives you a sense of security. You want an attitude that's expansive, where you accept people. You're not always judging them. You're not negative about them. You understand that people can't necessarily help who they are. You're open to change. You're open to adventure. And that kind of attitude gives you a certain degree of freedom. When we have a setback or a failure in life, which is inevitable, do we do one of two things? Do we analyze ourselves and see what we did wrong and how we could change? Or do we immediately look outward and blame other people? That person screwed me. Society doesn't like me. Exactly. Because of these circumstances, I'm screwed and I can never help it. It's the world, it's not me. That's a self-sabotaging pattern of behavior. Because if you're always pointing fingers at other people and blaming them, you're never going to learn from your experiences, and you're going to end up quite bitter. So that's probably the main source of self-sabotage, not reflecting on the role that you played in what happened. Now, we're not in charge of everything that happens in life. There are circumstances beyond our control. But a lot of what does happen to us is something we do that we are responsible for. There are amazing studies about the role of attitude and what happens to you in life. There's this thing called the Pygmalion effect. Teachers who treat a student as if they are smart and going to do well, those students end up doing well. So how you treat people, how you think about yourself, has a great impact on what happens to you. When doctors prescribe a new medication, there's always the same trend. When a new medication has been invented, the success rate is like 80%, because people believe in it because it's new. Then 2 years later, it starts going down. It's the placebo effect. So if you believe something is going to work, if you believe that you are great and you deserve good things, that you are capable, you'll end up making those things happen. How you look at yourself will often determine what ends up happening to you. If you're talking about what causes self-sabotage, if you go through life thinking, God, I'm not really that good, there's something wrong with me, I don't really deserve good things, I don't deserve success or money, people read that off of you. A major theme in my work is that we are masters at reading people's body language and nonverbal behavior. When somebody feels that they don't deserve things, it's an off-putting quality in them, and it pushes people away. You create self-fulfilling dynamics by how you look at yourself and your attitude. I wrote about this. Think like royalty to be treated like royalty. There's a story of Christopher Columbus, who came from dirt-poor poverty but imagined that he was royalty. And by imagining that, people started treating him like that. And as they treated him like that, he felt even greater about himself. He was able to convince the King of Portugal to give him ships, when in fact he was sort of a mediocre captain. Your attitude and how you think about yourself determine how people treat you and what happens in life. Now, people always talk about being a better listener, and their advice is usually very weak. Okay, I'll become a better listener. Yeah, I'll try that. But it's very hard to overcome certain patterns. So I try to tackle the question of, why is it that you're not a good listener? And at the root of that is, you're more interested in yourself than you are in the other person. You won't admit that. You'll say, oh, no, that's not me. I really like people. But the truth is, you're more interested in your own thoughts, your own ideas, things you're so certain about, your own experiences, than about that other person and what they're saying and what's going on inside them. If you can flip that around, if you can actually feel the motivation to get inside the other person's head and their experience, then you will suddenly become a better listener. That's the key. Not just telling people to listen more. The key is the quality of the listening and the emotion involved. So it's about genuine curiosity. Yes, if you genuinely want to get inside that other person, inside their life, then suddenly you will start listening. What will make you interested in other people? Well, first off is the idea that you don't know them. Normally, when you're on a first date with someone, or you're just meeting someone, you have assumptions about them. You create a simplified version of who they are, and that's what you think you know, and that'll stay with you forever. Instead, you want to think, that person is more interesting than I imagine. Their first appearance isn't really who they are. They're like a book that I could read. We love going to movies and getting inside other characters and what motivates them, being taken along for a ride. Think of the people that you meet in life as a character in a movie. You want to know what motivates them. They are more interesting than you think. They've had traumas. They've had problems from their early childhood. They have fantasies. They have a shadow, a dark side to their personality they're not revealing. They're more complicated and interesting than you think. So if you're motivated to understand what makes them tick, their experience, suddenly you will start listening. That's the key. And look, if you found value in what we've talked about today, I'd love for you to subscribe and continue this journey with me. Because understanding human nature, reading people, mastering these social dynamics, this is lifelong work. The more we explore it together, the more you'll see these patterns everywhere. So hit that subscribe button and let's keep learning. Because here's what I want you to remember. Everyone you meet is a world unto themselves, a complex story waiting to be understood. And when you approach life with that kind of curiosity, that kind of openness, you don't just become better at reading people, you become better at being human.